come down here, please, because I'm alone.
Did you hear that? Yeah.
I know y'all heard that.
I heard that. Did you hear that?
I know I heard something down here. What was that?
Oh, did you hear that?
Dude, I just saw some eyes back there.
Yeah,
Which is worse. You hear something?
Yes.
Welcome back to Misfit Apparitions, the podcast. I'm Don, and I thank you for being here as I talk about the history of locations known for paranormal activity. However, this episode is a little different. But first, please check out our website at misfitapparitions.com and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and subscribe to our YouTube channel with the handle at Misfit Apparitions. Listen to the podcast on our website, our YouTube channel, or wherever podcasts can be found. And if you enjoy the podcast, please give us a review, a simple like or thumbs up, and tell your friends about us. It is greatly appreciated as it helps the podcast get recognized. If you have any comments, concerns, or questions, please drop us an email at mopod@misfitapparitions.com. That's MOPOD @misfitapparitions.com, or ask us directly from a social media platform that you feel comfortable using. Well, the reason this episode is different is that I will be talking about a place that no longer exists, but its history is so interesting that I had to make an episode about it. The location is in northern Tennessee, about 6 miles south of the Tennessee-Kentucky border, specifically Adams, Tennessee, in Robertson County. In 1817, the Bells, a hard-working, faith-based family, became haunted by an entity that would later become known as the Bell Witch, while the patriarch of the Bell family would become the first person whose death was attributed to supernatural causes. John Bell Sr. was born in Edgecombe County, North Carolina in 1750. He was raised on a farm while receiving the best a country school education could give at that time. He learned from his father, William Bell, the value of hard work, which he carried into adulthood. In 1782, John married Lucy Williams, the daughter of a wealthy man who held substantial influence in the community. She and John settled down on a farm he had purchased. Their first 6 children were born in North Carolina: Jesse, John Jr., Drury, Benjamin, Esther, and Zadok. Realizing the need for more space, John Bell moved the family to the northern Tennessee county of Robertson along the Red River. The family expanded by 3 with the births of Elizabeth, Betsy, Richard Williams, and Joel Egbert. The Bell family home was located almost a half-mile south of the Red River in Adams, Tennessee. The 1.5-story, double-log constructed house consisted of 6 large rooms and 2 halls. The family were devoted Christians and attended church regularly. Over time, John Sr. became one of the most hospitable, influential, and wealthiest men in the community. One of those families in the community was the Batts, Frederick and his wife Kate. In the book, An Authenticated History of the Famous Bell Witch, author M.V. Ingram described Kate Batts as, quote, a large fleshy woman weighing over 200 pounds and was headstrong and very exacting in her dealings with men. She was exceedingly jealous of her rights, not always knowing what they were, conceiving the idea that everybody was trying to beat her out of something. Her tongue was fearful. She did not hesitate to tackle any man who came under the ban of her displeasure with a scourge of epithets. This, however, was tolerated as a weakness and excited the sympathy of a better class, who humored her whims, but no one cared to encounter her organ of articulation when she was in a bad humor, and especially the ladies, who were generally afraid of her and could not endure her methods and dominating spirit. End quote. Superstitious women firmly believed Kate was a witch based on her constant beseeching of brass pins from every lady she came in contact with. They believed that once Kate obtained the pins, she would have power over those from whom she obtained them. Now, because of an incident regarding a transaction she had with John Bell Sr. when he first moved to the community, and Kate speaking harshly about John, vowing to get even with him, many in the community later referred to the witch as Kate. Of course, this riled up Kate as she spent about a month attempting to uncover the rumor, but had no success. The first confirmation of the Bell Witch occurred in 1817, when John Bell Sr. was tending to his cornfield when he was suddenly confronted by a strange-looking animal, one he had never seen before. The animal continued its gaze on him as Bell got closer to it. With gun in hand, Bell fired a shot in its direction, causing it to run away. He convinced himself that it was probably a dog. Several days later, his son Drew saw a large bird and believed it to be a wild turkey. He returned back home to retrieve a gun, and as he positioned himself to fire at it, the bird flew off. He immediately recognized that the bird was not a turkey, but one of spectacular size. Then one evening, Betsy Bell, while walking among the large forest trees near the house, observed a little girl dressed in green, swinging from the limb of a tall oak tree. Soon after these sightings, the Bell home became a source of unexplained activity. It began with a knocking at the door and on the walls throughout the house. Then it progressed to the sounds of animals gnawing, dogs fighting, and chains dragging on the floor. Whenever a candle was lit to locate the sound's origin, the sound would end. Then bed blankets were suddenly thrown off their sleepers, and the sounds would continue all through the night, preventing anyone from getting a good night's rest. However, two family members would suffer more than the others, John Bell Sr. and his daughter Betsy. John Bell Sr. soon began feeling ill after his tongue would suddenly become stiff, thus preventing him from eating. It was like a small stick of wood set crosswise in his mouth, pressing out both his cheeks. 11-year-old Betsy suffered more from the phenomena as compared to her siblings. Her torment came in the form of her cheeks becoming frequently red, as if being slapped, and her hair being pulled until she screamed in pain. It became so bad that her parents allowed her to spend nights with friends so that she could sleep without interruption, but it didn't matter. The torture followed her to her friends' homes and left those unsuspecting families nights of disturbances as well. Initially, John Bell Sr. made his family promise to never speak to anyone of what was occurring in their home, but after the disturbances became increasingly intolerable, he asked his closest neighbor and his wife to stay overnight and investigate. That night, after saying prayers and retiring for the evening, the noises began fervently. When it started up in a room occupied by the neighbor, he immediately brought in light, which caused the noises to stop, but only to start up in another room. When the neighbor attempted to communicate, the disturbances would stop for some time, but then continue a little later. The neighbor concluded that the phenomena was supernatural and intelligent, as it stopped its disturbance when spoken to. He suggested to John that he allow others in the community to investigate, which he did, and which made the Bell family secret public knowledge. As visitors came to witness the phenomena and ask it questions, the annoying sounds converted into whistles. Whistles became weak whispers. Weak whispers became low whispers, until finally a distinct voice could be heard by everyone. After this happened, visitors came in larger numbers, eager to ask it questions. In an answer to the question, "Who are you and what do you want?" the reply came, "I am a spirit. I was once very happy but have been disturbed." The question was repeated, "Who are you and what do you want?" This time the response was, "I am a spirit who was once very happy but have been disturbed and made unhappy." Then a follow-up question was asked, "How were you disturbed and what makes you unhappy?" And the reply, "I am the spirit of a person who is buried in the woods nearby, and the grave has been disturbed. My bones disinterred and scattered, and one of my teeth was lost under this house, and I'm here looking for that tooth." The missing tooth story was supported by an incident which occurred a few years earlier, when farm hands were clearing some of the land and came upon an Indian burial mound, but were careful to work around it and leave it undisturbed. However, a young neighbor boy heard about it from one of Bell's slaves named Drew. The boy was convinced that the mound contained treasure, so he convinced Drew to assist him in disinterring the bones. Having found no treasure, The boy took a jawbone to the Bell home and threw it against the wall, thus jarring out a loose tooth. That tooth fell through a crack in the floorboard. John Sr. scolded them both and made one of them take the jawbone back and rebury it where it was found. Later, having deduced that this was what the voice spoke about, John removed that portion of the floorboard, raked up the dirt underneath, and carefully sifted through it. But the tooth was never found. It was then that the voice laughed, saying it was all a joke to fool old Jack. Now being referred to as a witch, more and more crowds of citizens showed up to hear it speak. Some theories as to what the voice was ranged from an Indian spirit, an evil spirit, witchcraft, or some sort of magic or trickery conjured up by the Bell family in order to make money. A number of visitors portrayed themselves as confident detectives capable of solving the mystery. John Bell opened up his home to all who visited, always providing food for them, including their horses, and never accepting 1 cent for his hospitality, despite being advised to. On one particular occasion, again after being asked questions of its origin, the witch replied, "I am the spirit of an early immigrant, who brought a large sum of money and buried my treasure for safekeeping until needed. In the meantime I died without divulging the secret, and I have returned in the spirit for the purpose of making known the hiding place, and I want Betsy Bell to have the money." As expected, some who heard the reply broke into laughter, while others followed up with further questions as to the buried treasure's location. Descriptively, the witch let on that the money was under a flat rock near the mouth of a spring along the Red River. It then chose Drew Bell and 2 others to journey to the location and fetch the money. They located the large stone previously described and spent a half day moving it. They found nothing underneath it. Then they mutually surmised that the money most likely sunk deeper into the earth because of the weight of the stone. So they started digging until they cleared about 6 square feet and nearly that deep before giving in to exhaustion and hunger. Later that evening, the witch gleefully gloated about the prank, correctly describing in minute detail the actions the men took to locate a treasure that was never there. Its ability to know who was doing what at any given time, anywhere, prompted visitors to inquire the goings-on of someone at such and such place, of which its reply would sometimes be, "I don't know. Wait a minute and I will go see." Within minutes it would reply with the details, which were then confirmed. In an incident that greatly surprised 2 reverends, the witch flaunted the ability to be in 2 locations at the same time. 2 preachers, a Methodist and a Baptist, were both giving their sermons in their churches 13 miles apart at the exact same time. Later that evening at the Bell House and among the already large crowd of people, both preachers showed up for supper. After supper, during a conversation between the 2 men about their sermons, the witch joined in with accurate descriptions of what each spoke about in their respective churches. Asked by one preacher how it knew, the reply was, "I was present and heard you." It then recited the entire sermon verbatim and did the same to the other preacher. In the end, though, the witch had it in for Betsy and John Bell Sr. For Betsy, her choice of suitor, Joshua Gardner, did not meet its approval, as if its opinion mattered, but its constant tormenting of Betsy and the never-ending loud whispered pleadings, "Please, Betsy Bell, don't have Joshua Gardner. Please, Betsy Bell, don't marry Joshua Gardner," did have a life-changing effect on her. And in John's case, it's not really clear why he was constantly afflicted with health issues, other than the witch declaring that it would torment old Jack Bell to the end of his life. But as Betsy's tortures decreased, her father's increased. Toward the end of his life, John suffered facial contortions and tongue swelling. Spells like this would persist for a couple of days, and then John appeared healthy, full of life, and able to go about his day until those good days became less frequent. On one occasion with his father, Richard Williams Bell describes his father's agony. Quote, "As the demonic shrieks died away in triumphant rejoicing, the spell passed off, and I saw tears chasing down my father's quivering cheeks. He turned to me with an expression of tender, compassionate fatherly devotion, exclaiming in a woeful, passionate tone, 'Oh, my son, not long will you have a father to wait on so patiently. I cannot much longer survive the persecutions of this terrible thing. It is killing me by slow tortures, and I feel that the end is nigh." End quote. With his wife Lucy constantly at his bedside, John frequently prayed and eventually reconciled his fate. On the day before his death, John had not awakened at his usual hour and appeared to be sleeping soundly, yet unnaturally. His son John went to the cupboard where he stored his father's prescribed medications and noticed an unfamiliar vial about 1/3 full of a dark-colored liquid. After an initial investigation showed that no one else in the family could account for the vial, a doctor was sent for immediately. Soon after, the witch exclaimed joyously, "It's useless for you to try to relieve old Jack. I have got him this time. He will never get up from that bed again." When asked about the mysterious vial, the witch replied, "I put it there and gave old Jack a big dose of it last night while he was asleep, which fixed him." With the help of a friend, John Jr. administered some of the vial's unknown fluid into the mouth of a cat. The cat jumped, began convulsing, and died quickly. The vial and its remaining contents was thrown into the fire that instantly caused a blue blaze to shoot up the chimney. The doctor detected the same smell in John's breath as was in the vial. For the remainder of the day and night, John Sr. never regained consciousness and took his last breath on the morning of December 20th, 1820. The witch took pleasure in his death by mocking him and singing songs of praise. At the funeral, after the grave was filled and mourners began departing, the witch broke out in song, "Roll me up some brandy-o." Almost instantly after this, the witch became less expressive. A few months later, Betsy and Joshua got engaged. Betsy's suffering appeared over, and she slowly began realizing it. Unfortunately, she felt she could never take the chance of the witch's return to haunt her if she married Joshua, so she broke off the engagement. Betsy did go on to marry her old school professor, Richard Powell, a man 11 years her senior, and together they had 7 children. Coincidentally, there is a theory that Professor Powell masterminded the entire Bell Witch ruse solely to marry Betsy Bell, but has never been proven. Before the witch departed in the spring of 1821, it said it would return 7 years later. And it did in February 1828, when the only occupants of the Bell home was Mother Lucy, Joel, and Richard, who went on to allegedly pen the eyewitness accounts of the disturbances entitled Our Family Trouble. The witch spent 2 weeks repeating the same agonizing events from its first visit. The 3 never spoke to the witch and kept its visit secret. When it left, it never returned. After Lucy passed away, the house was deserted, and the land was divided between the heirs. The Bell house continued standing for several more years, having been used to store grain. Sadly, it was eventually torn down. An interesting story has been passed down from one of the visitors to the Bell home during the time John Bell Sr. allowed investigations of the phenomena in his home. It's about the time not yet President General Andrew Jackson and his party stopped by to have an encounter with the witch. General Jackson's party consisted of a wagon loaded with a tent, provisions, and other supplies, and an unknown number of men on horseback. On their way, just a short distance from the Bell home, as the wagon was traveling over a smooth, level piece of wood, it stopped and became stuck. The whipped horses could not move the wagon. A number of men dismounted and assisted in attempting to push the wagon forward, but it still would not move. The wagon's wheels were removed one at a time, examined, and confirmed to rotate on the axles without issue. The men repeated their previous attempts at moving the wagon, but it stayed stuck. At that point, the general threw up his hands, exclaiming, "By the eternal, boys, it is the witch." After which, a voice from nearby bushes said, "All right, General, let the wagon move on. I will see you again tonight." Baffled, the men failed to locate the source of the voice. The general said again, "By the eternal, boys, this is worse than fighting the British." Then the horse recovered and the wagon was moving again. They arrived at the Bell home and were welcomed inside by John Sr. In Jackson's party was a self-proclaimed witch finder, or witch hunter, who was a braggadocious man eager to put an end to the Bells' unwelcome visitor. After growing tired and weary of hearing about the witch finder's stories, the general whispered into the ear of the man nearest him, "Sam, I'll bet that fellow is an arrant coward. By the eternals, I do wish the thing would come. I want to see him run." Immediately there were footsteps and the same voice they heard earlier in the bushes. "All right, General, I am on hand, ready for business." The witch then spoke to the witchfinder. "Now, Mr. Smarty, here I am. Shoot." Mr. Smarty pulled the trigger, but his pistol failed to fire. "Try again," said the witch, and Smarty did, with the same result. The witch then said, "Now it's my turn. Look out, you old coward, hypocrite, fraud. I'll teach you a lesson." The sound of an open hand slap caused the witchfinder to fall down before recovering to his feet and stumbling about the room, screaming, "Oh, my nose! My nose! The devil has got me! Oh, Lordy, he's got me by the nose!" On its own, the door to the home flew open, and the witchfinder ran out at full speed, causing Jackson to drop to the floor in laughter, saying, "By the eternal, boys, I never saw so much fun in all my life. This beats fighting the British." Then the witch added to what he said, "Lord Jesus, how the old devil did run and beg. I bet he won't come here again with his old horse pistol to shoot me. I guess that's fun enough for tonight, General, and you can go to bed now. I will come tomorrow night and show you another rascal in this crowd." Originally wanting to stay a week, General Jackson decided he and his party had had enough and left in the morning. That's going to be it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. On behalf of the team, I appreciate those whose valuable time listening to our podcast has taken up. Whether you have heard them all or this is your first listen, thank you for allowing the podcast to fill your ears with a bit of paranormal history. When Ernest, Mike, and I officially agreed upon the name of our team in the summer of 2021, I really wanted to include some kind of podcast. When I realized I would have the opportunity to research the history of locations known for paranormal activity, it made being part of this team that much more exciting. So much so that I talked Ernest into joining me in launching the podcast. I would confidently say we are both satisfied with Season 1's 16 episodes. But during its second season, toward the end of last year, episodes became delayed for months simply because of life. More recently, as much as we enjoy the research, the investigations, reviewing recorded audio and video for paranormal evidence from those investigations, creating the investigation videos, the podcasts, and simply trying to keep up our presence on social media, it has become clear to us that there is just not enough time for it all. Ernest and I review hours upon hours of recorded audio and video from our investigations. Wait, let me rephrase that. He is doing 99% of it right now. We also spend a lot of time putting together the team's investigation videos, which themselves are so far behind compared to all that we have acquired from the nearly 24 locations the team has visited. Whereas Ernest devotes his time to evidence review, I do the same for the podcast, doing the research, writing, recording, editing, and launching of each episode. So something has to give. I have decided to shift the time I devote to the podcast to evidence review so that our videos can be released more often than just once per year. We have captured some really good stuff in so many places and are eager to share it, but we want the videos to look and sound better with each release. Until the team adds a new member or two who can assist with the review process, episodes of the podcast will be released on an occasional basis. Ernest and I are on board with recording episodes live while investigating locations, similar to our recorded episodes from McIntyre Villa and Sally House. Recording it that way gets the entire team involved. We have a list of at least a dozen locations we plan on traveling to, and I have just as many ideas for future episodes, so the podcast is not going away indefinitely. We are just changing our focus to investigation videos for now. Having said that, we realize that growing a fan base with investigation videos is a way to garner notoriety, and that would be a huge plus for us. But that is not what this team is about. If that were the case, we would have immediately jumped on board with the so many other supposed investigation teams out there, with their tens and hundreds of thousands of followers, that often over-dramatize their movements and reactions with clever editing and peppered subtle music cues. Entertaining it definitely is. By contrast, there are so many other investigation teams, like our own, whose mission statement includes capturing, documenting, and sharing their findings. Those are the teams that debunk on site and are familiar with the lengthy downtimes between capturing something unexplainable. Those are the teams advancing paranormal unity. Those teams are real. Those are the teams we respect. We appreciate every one of you who has known us since our beginning, and the ones just finding out about us. Please stay with us. We are not going away. There is much more to come. And remember, it's not the things in your life that matter. It's the memories. Cherish those and those whom you make them with. Thank you. And as Ernest reminds us, stay spooky, fellow misfits.